Welcome to another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer. Tonight is sort of a follow-up to last week's episode where we talked to Jerry Croteau and Mark Hill around the Be My HIValen+ine event that's happening right here in the Drawers Kitchen and Design Studio on February 14th, Valentine's Day. As we mentioned in that broadcast, this is sort of an homage to the June's Eatery event that happened back in 2017, November of 2017, that Casey House in Toronto put on. Casey House is Canada's first and only standalone HIV hospital for folks living with HIV. And they put together this event back in November of 2017, a pop-up restaurant in Toronto where all of the chefs were folks living with HIV. And I was fortunate enough to be part of that event as a patron. And as I mentioned on the last show, that sort of sparked my desire to have something very similar on a smaller scale here in Barrie. And in partnership with Elevate, Vive Healthcare, and some of our local sponsors, as well as Drawers, we've been able to actually bring this event to Barrie, again, on a smaller scale. June's has another pop-up restaurant that's happening the first week of March 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Toronto. One of my guests is actually going to be one of the chefs for that event as well. I will also, this time around, be a chef at June's Eatery. But instead of 16 folks living with HIV, we have 4 of us that will be doing the food prep and serving of the meal here on Valentine's Day. And I have those individuals who are part of that experience here with me on tonight's episode. I've got my buddy Kelly, Guy, and Carla, who are all folks living with HIV here in Simcoe County and are going to be our chefs for that evening. So thank you and welcome all of you to Let's Be Perfectly Queer. I'm going to start with you, Kelly. Kelly is also my colleague at the Gilbert Centre. We both work at the Gilbert Centre for Social and Support Services, and the Be My HIValen+ine event, while not only an awareness campaign for folks in our area, it's also the launch event for the Gilbert Centre's 25th anniversary, 25 years of this sort of work being done here in Barrie, and it's a real privilege, I know, for myself, and I think I can speak for Kelly here to be part of that. But getting to the event and being a chef as part of this event, why was it important to you to be part of this?
I think it's important for me to be part of this to reveal that I am HIV positive, and I have been for 35 years, and to smash stigma and be part of an event, a very aware event. Now,
have you disclosed your status on such a public scale before, or is this the first time? And,
no.
And how are you feeling about that?
This is my very first time disclosing it. A lot of my family and some friends know in the Muskoka area. It's scary, but I feel that the awareness needs to be there, that HIV can affect anybody.
Yeah, I think it's important because we talked a lot with Mark and Jerry on last week's show around folks in the LGBTQ community and the effect of HIV on those of us. And unfortunately, we ran out of time and I didn't get a chance to say, you know, it affects so many more folks. And that's why I was very happy to have both you and Carla join us as women living with HIV to talk about your experiences and how the stigma affects you. Because we hear so much about the impact of the epidemic on gay men, but we don't have enough information, and certainly not enough, in my opinion, disclosure and awareness and visibility of women living with HIV, especially cisgendered heterosexual women. So yes, can you touch on that a little bit for us? And
yeah, so I haven't had any community discrimination, because some people know my status, but some people, a lot of people don't. But I have had discrimination around dating and being told that I have AIDS and not to touch me and things like that. So I think coming on the show and being part of the Be My HIValen+ine is to smash the stigma and to bring awareness that, you know, HIV doesn't only, it affects everybody. Everybody across, no one is, you know, immune from it. It can affect you in your life.
Yeah, that's one thing HIV is not. It's not discriminatory, that's for sure.
No.
It does affect everyone, and there are parts of the world where women and children are more greatly affected by HIV than gay men, for example.
Yes, yes.
Well, that may be the predominant stat in Canada and North America. Certainly sub-Saharan Africa, we see the majority of folks affected by HIV are women and children there.
Yes,
so
yes.
you know how I feel about you being on this program, about you being part of this event, and I applaud you for that. And I think, as I've told you before, by doing this, you're saving lives. I mean, you do that every day in the work you do at the Gilbert Center, and Kelly does some awesome work there with women in particular, but other groups of folks living with HIV locally, and the peer support that Kelly offers, and it's part of the work that I do as well, in talking with folks who are newly diagnosed. We have folks who come to this area as immigrants to Canada, and helping to navigate some of the barriers around that and access to medication. And I think the fact that you are brave enough to be ready to tell your story is going to do more good than I think you can even imagine. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to my buddy Guy, who is the most experienced of all of us in this sort of. I'm not outing you for your age, Guy, because we're pretty close in proximity there. But Guy was part of the June's Eatery, the first June's Eatery in 2017, and was trained by Matt Basile, the celebrity chef who works on that event. And to have you as part of our event here locally, I think is fantastic. It was through June's that you and I met, and have been able to forge a friendship. And then you moved up to this area shortly thereafter, and now being part of our local community and part of this event is wonderful. So tell us a little bit about your story and why you're part of this event and June's as well.
Well, I'm a gay man living with HIV for over 30 years. I lost my partner back in 2000, so have been through the tough side of HIV and what that can mean. And through the work with Caring for Him, I got involved with Casey House, which is an outstanding organization. I got involved with the board, and the chair and CEO came to me back in summer of 2017 to tell me about this. It was a really bold and innovative initiative. June's was the first in the world, and really was to sort of start a dialogue about smashing stigma. We've made so many advances in HIV. It's not what it once was, but the big challenge is stigma. Stigma in the general community, stigma in the gay community as well. And it's all about ignorance and fear. We need information and education. We need to start and maintain a dialogue, and that's what June's did. It had, like I said, it was the first of its kind in the world, and raised an incredible amount of media attention. We had over a billion media impressions, which was just amazing. And I was really proud to be a part of it, and posted on Facebook about it, and all my friends were coming back, when are you going to do this in Sudbury? When are you going to do this in Ottawa? And the first one outside in Toronto is in Barrie, and hats off to you, my friend. You've single-handedly driven this, and I think it's an amazing thing to carry on that dialogue. And I'm delighted to hear we're doing the family-style setting where food is such a personal and intimate thing amongst human beings, and creates a dialogue setting, and just carrying on the conversation, spreading the word that this is nothing to be feared. Only ignorance is holding us back. So, I applaud you for what you're doing, and I'm delighted to be a part of this. So, thank you.
I've definitely not done it alone, but I'm glad you touched on that. The fact that yes, this is a family-style meal, and this area right here is where we're going to have a long table that will seat 50 of our guests on Valentine's Day. And behind us is a space where we'll all be cooking this meal. And what's really cool is, because it's such a smaller scale, not only will we be preparing this meal, but we're actually going to be able to get a chance to serve the meal to our guests and allow us to interact with the guests while they're eating. They'll be able to watch us as we're preparing and chat back and forth. And I'm really looking forward to that. Again, the very first Elevate event, who we partnered with on this event, was held in this space as well. So I know what that was like to to watch the chef do that and his work behind the scenes while we sat in the. It's nice that we have wine and alcohol pairings that go along with the meal as well. That helps to elicit conversation as well, right? And
perfect timing that it's Valentine's Day, because this is a message of love.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Triumphing over hate, and through education and smashing stigma.
Carla Martinez.
Sorry, I'm still reeling from Kelly's disclosure.
Yes. So, same question essentially. Give us a little bit of your background, your story, and why you felt you wanted to be part of Be My HIV Valentine.
Okay, I always say I'm fairly newly diagnosed, but I guess it's getting old now. I was diagnosed on May 4th in 2017 and immediately came out as being HIV positive. And I was surprised at how much I didn't know about it and needed to get educated. And the more I got educated, the more I felt people needed to hear more about HIV and learn the leaps and bounds it's taken over the years. And so I jumped on the whole Smash Stigma campaign, and if you're sitting next to me on a bus or in a car with me, you're hearing all about the newest, latest science in HIV. So I'm really, really honored to be part of this eatery. I can't wait.
Well, we're certainly proud to have you, and I think, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but just going back to Kelly's disclosure and the courage that it takes to do that in such a public setting. Can you talk to me a little bit about when you first found out you were diagnosed? I know one of the places that you went to get information and support was the Gilbert Center. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the earliest support you may have had around that was from Kelly. Can you just give us an idea of that relationship and how it's flourished?
When I was diagnosed and I was reeling from the news, I just started Googling everything that I could, and sure enough, the Simcoe County AIDS Association transformed itself into the Gilbert Center, and as a branch, if I believe I have that correctly, a branch of the Gilbert Center was HIV information and a source for good information. So I reached out and I was immediately connected with Kelly. And the irony is unbelievable, because you sat there going, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And it's a hard pill to swallow, but we got there. We just got to keep talking.
Yeah, absolutely. As Guy mentioned, it's all about the stigma associated with HIV, and stigma, my definition of stigma has always been ignorance and fear equals stigma. Very dissimilar to U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable. That's how we combat the stigma. We talk about it, we educate, and we try and alleviate that fear through education. And doing this sort of event and being on a show like this where we can show people what the face of HIV looks like in 2020, I think is important. And again, I applaud each of you for being as open about your status. Just my own disclosure, I was diagnosed in February of 2015, so it'll be very close to my 5-year anniversary when this event takes place. And I think certainly as long-term survivors, do you like that term, long-term survivor? Is that?
I'm just a survivor.
Yeah. So I mean, I think everybody's definition is different, but certainly you and I consider myself an HIV baby, having been diagnosed in 2015. Well, and it's different when you and I are diagnosed in an era where the science is solid, and while anybody that I still talk to, even today, newly diagnosed, those initial fears, there's that common thread of I'm going to be alone forever, no one's going to love me, and that's the end of my life. Even knowing the science and having that, it's that 35 plus years of misinformation and stigma and campaigns that were out back in the early days of the epidemic that were very widespread, that our government put out there to have people protect themselves. Now that we have got the science there that proves that you get on your medication, you become undetectable, have a suppressed viral load, you cannot pass on the virus. There isn't the awareness campaign around that information and the truth about what it means to live with HIV today, like there was with the misinformation of 35 years ago. We don't have those campaigns any longer. It's certainly something that in the work I do, I push for and advocate for. but I think having this sort of a platform where we can talk openly about living with HIV is incredibly important. And if I could maybe get back to Kelly and talk to us a little bit more about what it means to be able to come out and talk about living with HIV as someone who's not part of the LGBTQ community. And while I say that, I mean, I feel like you are because of all the work we do together. But as I mean, we're all cisgendered. We're all cisgendered white folks, so we've got a little bit of privilege sitting up here today as well. And not to tokenize anyone, but my goal was to try and find a little bit more diversity in Simcoe County to bring to the table for this event as well. But again, a lot of the stigma around it and the fact that folks who are even marginalized more than the fact that we're living with HIV, but people of color, recent immigrants, even other women have difficulty being able to talk about this openly. So if you can maybe just talk a little bit more about that and why it's important for you to be part of this event and sort of be that face for a marginalized group within an already marginalized group.
I think for me, myself, it's important because I want to tell my story. I don't want other people telling my story and getting it wrong, because it has got wrong. People have told it wrong. And I want to be able to say that, you know, being a woman, heterosexual woman living with HIV and undetectable for 10 plus years, it's okay. Like, if you don't want to have a relationship, it's okay to have that relationship. And I think that's the main part of disclosing my status for the HIV Valentine and on your show, is to bring that awareness to individuals around the U=U, the undetectable U is untransmittable, and that the HIV doesn't discriminate. Anybody can get it. So just the awareness, a part about it, is really important for me, and also for the work that I do, the awareness around that too.
And what about you, Carla? Sort of the same question, and having that platform. I mean, like I say, Guy and I, we're almost a tokenized vision of what HIV is supposed to look like. The gay white guy is supposed to be the guy with HIV, right? Obviously, you're not a gay white guy, so.
Very similar, same story. I didn't want other people telling my story, and yeah, I think that was really important to me. More so than anything, I didn't want the rumor mill to start, and I thought I'll just, you know, I was kind of pulled into it as well, but I thought, no, I might as well just go with it. And once I got educated as to what was going on and the newer information, newer science out there regarding HIV, that I felt obligated, actually, to just start teaching everybody and anybody. I practically walk around with a little billboard sign on me, but
Or a frisbee that says U=U.
or a frisbee, yeah, anything, T-shirts, whatever. I'm wearing.
Yeah, I think both Kelly and I have our U=U T-shirts on underneath our aprons today.
And it's important. It's not what it used to be. And like you said, we came on at a I hate to say perfect time, but it's horrible to say that. But to have things happen the way they did, it was perfect for me. I'll speak for myself, because to find out what there was available and to know it was nothing at all what I had in my head, and that was really important for me to just tell everybody, because I'm like, oh my God, that's not what I thought, and I thought, geez, if I'm thinking that way, I need to tell other people. And it is hard. The whole dating thing, we could just do a whole episode. I think all of us could on that. And I think I wouldn't say it's even harder, but it's very difficult being an HIV positive woman trying to date. And, we all know the stigma surrounding, partners potentially disclosing if you weren't ready to disclose. And that's just a whole nother ballgame. But
yeah, that's a show we could do a few episodes on. Definitely.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Absolutely. So I just want to make sure the audience is aware too. We talk about the new medications and the science available now, and I think this is why it's important that any dialogue we have around HIV today, we have to include long-term survivors or survivors of the epidemic. If it weren't for folks like Kelly and Guy, would we necessarily have been able to develop the science that we have today that allows you and I, as relatively newly diagnosed, to know that we can get on our medications right away if we have access, and not everyone does, but for those fortunate enough to have access to medication, and reach a suppressed viral level within 6 months. I mean, for me, I think it was less than 3 months, and I became undetectable and have remained undetectable ever since. And U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable, means that folks living with HIV who are on effective treatment and adhere to that treatment cannot pass on the virus sexually to partners. It's a no-brainer. It's simple science, but it's a message that a lot of folks are still unaware of, and sadly, a lot of folks living with HIV are still unaware of that. I think the most recent stats indicate 14% of folks in Canada living with HIV aren't aware that they're living with the virus. And that's because people are afraid to get tested because they're afraid of what that positive diagnosis means. And the more we talk about it and dismantle the stigma, the more folks are going to be encouraged to get tested. And just on that theme of stigma, and I'm going to go back to you for this one, Guy, as a long-term survivor, I can only imagine in the 5 years, almost 5 years that I've been diagnosed, I've certainly experienced stigma, mostly, as you mentioned, within the gay community, which is really disheartening when you have people online saying that you should kill yourself because you're living with HIV, and you're looked at as that much of a threat. 30 plus years living with HIV, do you have some stories around stigma and how that's affected your life?
Oh, well, many. Well, first of all, I want to say long-term survivor shouldn't be a length of service badge. It's commitment to smashing stigma is what counts, and the two of you are committed to that in spades, and I applaud you for that, for embracing it so wholeheartedly. But stigma, I mean, you know, even just on social media apps, when you're going back and forth with someone, and the question usually comes up in the most derogatory and demeaning way, and the way it's usually worded is, "Are you clean?" For a long time, it really depressed me. It got me down, and it's so belittling, and it's so ignorant and so lacking in understanding and compassion about another human being to talk to someone that way. But it's again, it's just the ignorance and fear. It's you know, once you're HIV positive, you haven't got that fear anymore. You understand. You cross that line. Right. You haven't got the fear anymore. It's, you get on with your life. You know, it's in broader society, in 20 or 30 years ago, there was an absolute hysteria that we went through, and there was everybody you share the information with, you have to think about deeply as to what the impact is going to be and how that person is going to respond, and you have to evaluate each individual relationship, be it family, be it friends, be it occupational, dealing with government services. You have to make an informed assessment of what the reaction might be and how you might be treated. We've come a long way, but there's still a lot of that needs to be addressed. And hopefully an event like this will push the wall that much further.
Yeah, especially in an area like this too, when we all know this is a highly conservative area, and living with HIV is stigmatizing enough in liberal society, but in a highly conservative area like Simcoe County, to have that support. I see it just in trying to reach out to folks living with HIV that are willing to come forward and discuss it, like the three of you so bravely are able to do. That's been a difficult feat for me. Initially, I was looking to have a minimum of 6 chefs for this event, but we got sort of stuck at 4, and it turns out that's going to be a good number after all anyway. And speaking with our chef Suzanne Barr, this is the perfect number for her to be able to train and get us out on the floor actually mingling with the guests as well. So I think it's turned out to be a good thing. But again, as I mentioned, ideally I'd love to be able to see a more diverse section of folks living with HIV represented as well, and maybe we'll do a second rendition of this in another couple of years, and we'll see some different faces and some new faces out there. But Hard to say. Hard to say. We see new faces come through the center every day, and I think as we work with those individuals, and again, I think especially you being on this show, because you've worked at the center longer than I have, and generally speaking, I think you have more contact with clients than I necessarily do at this point anyway in my career, and I think our clients seeing your face and telling your story on a public platform may encourage others to do. So not that anybody has to. It's not that you get HIV and you automatically have to disclose and be out there and talk about it and become an advocate. That's not everyone's calling. But I know, I think I can certainly speak for Carla on this, because we've talked about this before. You and I do see it as sort of an obligation and an opportunity to give back. And the fact that we have been diagnosed in a time where, you know, thanks to those before us and those who aren't with us any longer, we're able to actually live a healthy life. And it's important that we sort of give back and pay respect to those that weren't as fortunate and share that story. And to be in a position where you know, we have that support of family and friends, and I think we're both at a time in our life too where even if we didn't, we'd probably, you know, just give a finger up to that and say, I don't care, you know, I'm doing this for me. And
well, I think my biggest shock was I was appalled. I'm like, do you know this? You know that there's one pill a day and you can become undetectable, you can't transmit. I was like, no, I didn't know that. And I'm like, me neither. So then I'm just appalled that the information isn't out there. It's getting there. It's getting there. Yeah. But I was appalled at my diagnosis that, yeah, it was.
Yeah, it's important to get that message out, because I think we've all discovered in the work we do around advocacy and activism that even within our healthcare system, this isn't talked about nearly enough. And we still don't have, we still have rather, HIV specialists that refuse to let their patients know what it means to be undetectable, and they're no longer a risk. And instead of alleviating that fear, help to stoke those fires of misinformation that have been going on for 35 plus years. And the more we talk about it, the better off society is going to be as a whole, because again, it gets people talking about it, it gets people unafraid to get tested, and we normalize that. And I mean, that's how we end this epidemic. We have all the tools in the toolbox available to us to end this epidemic. There's no doubt in my mind that we have the tools to do it, but we need the political will to ensure it gets done. And I hope by doing these sort of events, we can come some small step closer to being able to do that. So I thank each and every one of you for being on today's show. Again, I applaud you for disclosing publicly. I know, Guy and Carla, this is not something that you haven't done before. You've talked openly many times around your diagnosis and what living with HIV means to you. But I know, Kelly, this is a huge step for you, and I know we've talked about this a lot on a personal level, and I just want to reassure you again that not only do you have my support, and I know Guy and Carla will stand behind you, you're not alone in this. You never will be. You never have been. And I appreciate the fact that you're being so willing to be part of this event and be on the show today. So thank you in particular for that. And thank all of you for staying with us for another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer. Tune in again next week and we'll have some more interesting guests. And on a future show, we're going to have a show all about the Be My HIValen+ine event and what happened and what it looked like, and you won't want to miss that. So thank you again for being with us tonight.